stopped by this big pile of bricks at the edge of the field. Big pile of bricks and a lot of fresh raspberries. So we're picking raspberries. And the guy said, Tony, I said, what's this old brick building? Because everything has history there. You know? And he said, well, this was the old palace of Henry VIII. We were hawking on the same grounds that Henry VIII hawked on.
Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back for another episode of the Falconry Toll podcast, brought to you in part by the fine folks at Marshall Radio Telemetry, the makers of the most carefully engineered and reliable tracking systems available. For more information on Marshall products, including their awesome GPS system, head to marshallradio.com. And also the Falconry Fund. And the Falconry Fund is a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting and protecting the various arts and practices of falconry and the cultural and environmental assets that make it possible. For more information on the Falconry Fund, including different projects they've got going on, as well as to donate, head to falconryfund.org. And this episode is the second to last episode of the New Mexico Falconers Association podcast series that we did. And it didn't take me very long at all after getting a chance to sit down and meet Tom in person for the first time. It didn't take me very much time at all to realize that this is a man of just almost an immeasurable amount of experiences, and not only experiences, but a variety of experiences. I haven't met very many people that probably have had as many different experiences as he's had throughout his life, doing all kinds of different things, and getting a chance to travel around the world and do them. It was really neat and an absolute pleasure to get to sit down and do another follow-up episode with him in person to get a lot more of these different stories down and just to discuss some of the different aspects of the different projects that he's gotten a chance to work on throughout his life and all these different parts of the world, and just, like I said, just talk to him about, you know, just his experiences and all the different things that he's gotten to do. So it was, like I said, an absolute pleasure, and I'm really glad that I got the opportunity to get a lot of these recorded for you all, and I'm sure that you will enjoy them, and I wish I would have had several more hours to get them all, but hopefully we'll get a chance to do that again in the future. But in the meantime, I hope you enjoy the ones that I did get recorded for you all, and I hope you enjoy them as much as I enjoyed recording them. So without further ado, here is Tom Smylie. Here we go. I guess I should start off by saying, thank you for supplying the man cave space here to go ahead and let us do these series of recordings today. And it's nice to officially meet you in person for the first time.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, as I say, it's been a minute, a hot minute actually. What, almost 3 years since you did the first episode, which was one of the first in the series, actually.
Yes, and we did it up at the Archives in Boise at the Peregrine Fund, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep, you and Israel and Zane, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so, good times. It's been a minute. What have you been up to since then?
Still flying birds and just breeding birds, and I write some magazine articles for magazines and do my bird shows, and I've been retired now officially as long as I work for the federal government. So
Interesting.
That's a milestone for me, bucket list. I wanted to be sure to get my money's worth. Being Scott, how we got to do that.
Well, that's great. Now, congratulations on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's. As far as I guess if there's a goal to have, that would definitely be one of them for sure. And I fantasize about that daily.
Most people do. I did for a long time. I was glad I retired when I was 58 years old on an early government buyout, and it was changed administration. So I was assistant regional director, and I just decided to go put peregrines back in the wild, and that's what we did. We work for the Peregrine Fund, my wife and I and daughter, and put peregrines back out like at up near Pinedale, Wyoming, and Mount Rainier, Washington.
Cool. Yeah, Pinedale's a neat little town. I've been through there a couple times since I've, as like we were talking before, being up in Wyoming again the past couple months. I went up there for the first couple times, and it's a neat little town.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it's a neat vibe. What all did you do up there whenever you were doing all the peregrine stuff?
Well, what we did is we were at a little town. As you go past Pinedale, you take a right and go to Cora.
Okay.
And there's a road up there, a beautiful lake up there and stuff. And we were at this ranch up there where we were releasing peregrines from the Peregrine Fund back into the wild. We had a hack site. We built a tower up there, and then we brought us about 4 or 5, I forgot now, IS peregrines, and we put them in the box. And then after a while, after they got fully feathered, then we just fed them remotely, and they converted back into wild peregrines. We did that for about 6 weeks, and we lived in our trailer, our daughter and I and myself, and that was the second hack site. It was important for me to do the hack sites because I gave, back when we started the Peregrine Fund back at Cornell at the Laboratory of Ornithology, Tom Cade and Jim Weaver were getting it set up. And New Mexico was one of the few places where we still had a population of peregrines. I knew of 5 Iries. And in 2 years, I took back to Jim and Tom 6 IS peregrines. And that was some of the seed birds to start the Peregrine Fund. And in 40 years, we released something like 4,000 birds back to the wild.
Okay. Yeah,
and those were from so I wanted to follow that, the complete wheel around where we were at. Peregrines were almost non-existent, and there was less than 100 pair left. Wow. And then to put these babies back from the ones I took from the wild genetically, and it was one of those bucket list things.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, everybody's got their own, whatever, like rewarding, things that they want to pursue. And I mean, I guess if there's a cause that you want to pursue, making sure a particular animal not going extinct would be, be one of them. So
to me, the peregrine skies would be empty without them.
Yeah.
And that's why I retired early, because I wanted to be sure to do the hack site and get the peregrines back out. And so we did it for 2 years in a row, my daughter and wife and I, before we went to Europe and lived for a while in Scotland and Ireland, England.
Nice.
Wow. Yeah, well, not Ireland, excuse me, England.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Is there, was there ever really, since you've had experience living here in the States, obviously, and over in Europe, did they ever face any similar issues with any of the species that they had over there?
Well, the peregrine was threatened out there too,
Yeah, same.
And there are a lot of Iries that are historical for hundreds of years were no longer active and stuff. In particular, as I recall, the Finland peregrine was in a lot of trouble and stuff. So yeah, they had the same. Well, DDT or DDE, the derivative of that, a breakdown there was found in the eggshells of the emperor penguins. We were using 10 pounds of DDT per acre on farmland.
Huh.
And in New Mexico, the reason why we had the peregrines here, not only did I know where they were because I'd been kind of studying them and flying them over the years, was the fact that we didn't have much agriculture. So the exposure to the DDT and DDE was
minimal. Yeah.
But Jim Anderson's study, for example, found that our Nottingham peregrines were eating about 80% swifts and swills and swifts. That was their main diet, which would be a highly insectivorous bird.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we had about 100 birds left. Of course, the tundra peregrine, the Arctic peregrine, was okay. In fact, I went up to Greenland and we took blood samples and stuff out of Iries and eggshell samples and stuff in Greenland and banded birds up there.
How does a person get into those kind of there's definitely plenty of other people that have done these either government grants or programs or whatever, however, whatever method is. But I mean, how did you fall into all that?
I really don't know in a lot of respects. I had some good friends, and it just kind of worked out. And actually, for the Green Falk operation, Bill Maddox called me and asked if I'd go to Greenland with him because they knew I knew falcons and I knew how to trap, and I was doing cliffs at the time. In fact, that picture right behind you is of Sanderstrom. Near Sanderstrom, it's that fjord there. The peregrines are nesting, and there's no trees on top of that cliff, so we had to tie the rope to the strut of the helicopter. And then I took that picture. She was screaming at us as we were doing her babies there.
Wow.
And then I spent 12-year project every fall trapping peregrines on the Dry Tortugas halfway between Cuba and Key West. And we did that for my wife and I, and kids did it for 12 years. I'd be out there for 2 to 3 weeks, and the peregrine was still endangered at that time, and we were taking samples and stuff and doing color marking and stuff. And some years, in a couple weeks, I'd catch 100 peregrines or so. Then other years we'd only catch 2, depending on the weather patterns. But it was really neat because the guys up the coast, like Dr. Ward, Scotty Ward, and those guys, Mike Yates, and those guys were banding birds on the Assocation Island. And they'd have these markers, and then I'd see them sitting at the island we were on was 14 acres in the middle of a coral reef. And there was like a few casuarine salt cedars, so they'd come in there to roost and stuff. And so they'd have them color marked, and I got pictures of them, and a couple of them I caught, and we had plastic bands on there, so we'd track these birds where they're going. A bird I banded up in Greenland was re-seen in Santa Fe, Argentina, south of Buenos Aires. So it gave us a whole data of information, and also the pesticide residue that was in the birds, because they're circumpolar, so we had a lot of interesting research going on. And catching peregrines out there in swimming trunks, and, and I had dogazas with starlings and stuff, and I used to teach scuba diving and stuff, so I'd go get lobsters for dinner, and it was tough.
Oh, yeah, it sounds terrible. Yeah, I'm sure you probably had the tiki bar set up just right on the end there also, so you could just go and get you a drink and a nice, get you a pina colada or whatever, and just kind of wait out and just...
Well, just my wife and I and my son and daughter, that was it.
Yeah.
It was all to ourselves, and it was a light station. The Coast Guard would come in once in a while and check to be sure everything's working all right.
Yeah. And how long did you say you were out there at a time?
12 years, 12 different falls.
Okay.
And one of them we came out during a hurricane.
Oh.
That was real exciting. There's a whole
bet.
story I could tell about that because, that was...
Tell it. Go ahead.
Bill Maddox, Dr. Maddox was going to replace us, and we'd already spent our 3 weeks out there, and this hurricane came off the coast of the Yucatan and coming across there, and all of a sudden, it was kind of interesting because the shrimp boats would get on the leeward side of the island during the day because the shrimpers go at night. That's when the shrimp come up out of the Gulf Stream. So they'd be there and they could sleep and stuff on the leeward side of the island, get away from the wave action. So all of a sudden the next day we got up and they were all gone. And there are usually about 6 or 8 of them anchored there for fishing in the Gulf Stream there. And what the hell's going on? So I got hold of the Coast Guard, and they said there's a hurricane coming. And those guys were just ready to pull out. Well, we had partied the night before with them. I mean, I'd give them a case of beer in their company boats, and they'd give us a 5-gallon bucket of fresh shrimp. I mean, it was rough.
Wow.
And so we had a big party out there that night with the Coast Guard guys and that. And so they overslept and stuff. So my wife, being the talkative gal that she is, she turned those guys around. They came back and picked us up. And I destroyed the nets as best I could and let the pigeons and starlings go. And we started coming out. And what normally took about a 3.5 to 4 hour trip from Key West out, it took us 14 hours to get back.
Jeez.
And this was an old shrimp boat. And the waves were so bad that the struts that they used to put the nets out from the side of the shrimp boats, we used those so we wouldn't tip over. And it was an old boat, and the throttle we held in with a piece of wedged wood going over these 30-foot waves of the Gulf Stream. And the crew, he had 3 other guys there, they were all sick. So I wound up running the boat, and we had taken a kid out with us, one of Sherry's family members, never seen the ocean before, from Minnesota. And he's sick, everybody's throwing up, and the captain's down to run the bilge point, and I'm leading this thing. It's like something out of a Hemingway movie or something. And boom, splash, and the deck had come way up, and it was dark, and Bill met us with a car at the end at the Key West, but it was pretty exciting. So Bill and Joan never got out there to trap that year. Man. But it was a lot of fun. Now.
Yeah, now in retrospect, right? But, would have been so fun if they wouldn't have overslept and you wouldn't have had that ride back to.
She turned those. My wife can turn. She can literally sell refrigerators to Eskimos. She talked those guys into coming, and they set a dinghy out, and we jumped in the boat and took off from the reef.
Jeez.
And,
well, so I mean, you said all those subsequent falls, but each fall, I mean, how long were you and your family just out there trying to catch
a couple
birds?
of times I went by myself the first year or so trapping with Bill Harry, a falconer from back east, and I usually get there middle of September until sometime almost the middle of October, because I have my birthday out there most times.
Okay. That's well, I mean, I guess there's worse ways to spend, September and October.
Oh, geez, it's beautiful. The water's usually really good, and the clarity is over 100 feet. And I found a couple of cannons from Spanish Galleon, the Park Service, who has Fort Jefferson, which is about 6 miles away from us, because we're the last on the Dry Tortuga Islands. And so I found some cannon for them they'd never seen, and I got some spikes from old shipwrecks and stuff. There was over 200 shipwrecks around there. And then the treasure hunter, Mel Fisher, was just off there, and that's where he found, $300 million worth of gold and stuff there. So there's a lot of history there, and Fort Jefferson was a fort, but it remained during the Civil War as a Union fort. And so that's where they put the prisoners for the Confederacy, and they put them there, and they had a whole big contingent of those guys there. And then they had a yellow fever outbreak, and Dr. Mudd, who was a doctor that treated Booth, was in a cell there, and he helped all the guards and everybody get past the yellow fever, and then he was, I think it was President Cleveland commuted his sentence off that island. And then the battleship Maine parked there before it went to Havana and got sunk. And I found a burial site on my little island. It was called Loggerhead Key, and there was a chap buried there. He died swimming while the boat was anchored. The ship was anchored there at Fort Jefferson. It was a really preserved area, and no wind or anything get to it. But he drowned out there, and he was buried at the light station out there. And I checked on his history. I went back through stuff with the Carnegie Institute, because they had the foremost marine research station on that island clear back in the 1900s. In fact, the first heart transplant was done on a shark there, but there's only ruins. It burned down. They had to close it down because of the German subs, and so they couldn't get stuff out there. And then the buildings burned down, so we just had the remains. So I found this, and sure enough, this guy, interestingly enough, he was born on a light station in Nova Scotia, and he was buried in a light station in the Dry Tortugas. Well, there's a lot of stories I could go on for.
There's something, I guess there's something to be said for consistency.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, it sounds to me also like you probably might have maybe been looking, for the wrong thing. Instead of trying to trap all these or, study all these birds, you should have been looking for a sunken treasure just off the coast there.
Yeah, it very likely could have been. Mel Fisher did real good. Of course, his son died out there diving for gold and stuff. But anyway, and Key West was nothing like it is now. I mean, it was a funky little town, and there wasn't any fast food restaurants or great restaurants. But I went back there when our daughter graduated from college about 12 years ago. That was her gift. She wanted to go to the Tortugas and see them, and we couldn't even find a way around Key West. I mean, it was all
so different.
Oh yeah.
Well, I mean, so whenever you were in Europe doing a lot of your projects over there, I mean, was it similar type of stuff to what you were doing on those islands, or was it?
No, it was
completely different.
I was doing speaking engagements.
Okay.
About how we recovered the peregrine in North America, basically, and also I did some talks on the research up in the Arctic, and it wasn't. I wasn't doing for the Europeans. I wasn't doing research per se. But I met with the researchers, and also we were in Germany. We lived there for a while, and I hawked with the Germans and eagle hawked and all that kind of stuff. But we were between houses. We sold our house in Albuquerque, and I hadn't started building this one over here. We're about 50 miles east, 40, 50 miles east. So we took that break time and went over there, and I got Scottish ancestries and stuff, and we did a lot. I like history a lot, so we went to where Battle of Coldhagen was and all that other stuff. So
yeah, there's
and hunt red grouse.
Yeah,
we'd hunt red grouse and drink it at night.
Yeah, there's a lot of history there. So I've been to Eastern Europe now a few different times, and each time it's just, you could go over there 100 times and still not get or absorb all of that history. It's nuts.
Yeah.
But so what were some of your experiences like with with hawking over there then when you were?
Well, it was really interesting. I'd known Jeffrey Pollard for a long time, and Tony Crosswell, who was became president of the British Club and then president of the European Falconers deal. And Tony he came over here and stayed for a while on some special project. And he stayed at our place. We gave him our place to stay at, and I think we went to Hackside or something. So Tony had a spare house next to his cottage in Norwich, outside of Norwich in Longstratton. And so I got, real hawking, So I went up north. This was the second time. I went up twice to Scotland with Jeffrey Pollard hawking, the first time by myself. Then the second time, Sherry gave me a ticket to fly to see Jeffrey and all that. We had a good time there with Roger Upton and some of those guys, And then the second time I was up there, we stayed next to Tony's, and then we were outside of Wick in Caithness, Scotland. And it was interesting. Tony was really into partridge hawking, which I liked better than the grouse hawking. And he had a beautiful tiercel peregrine, and that he flew called Nelson after the British admiral. And so we're out there flying these fields, and the British gave me a goshawk to hunt with and a peregrine. The club did, which was real generous of them while I was there. And we were flying partridge, and Tony's a gourmet cook, and we stopped by this big pile of bricks at the edge of the field. Big pile of bricks and a lot of fresh raspberries. So we're picking raspberries, and I said, Tony, I says, what's this old brick building? Because everything has history there, And he said, well, this was the old palace of Henry VIII. We were hawking on the same grounds that Henry VIII hawked on.
Wow.
It give you a depth of falconry, that holy cow, Henry was out here beating the bush just like we were. And I thought that was pretty incredible. And the hawking, some of the hawking was great. I was a guest of the German Deutschen Falconer, and watch them work their goshawks was really something. But it was like going to a formal banquet here in New Mexico. I mean, they all had their, their forest green and their hats and their ties and stuff, and I'm out there in a pair of Carhartts, and it was a very formal. At the end of the night, they had all the rabbits and the pheasants and everything all laid out, and then they had the horn, and then they had the torches and everything. I was just waiting for Goring to come out. And it was kind of scary, But there, and I don't know that ferret hunting. I've never been a popular of it. They got these beautiful handmade boxes and stuff, and they put the ferret out there, and the countryside's like, it's not like us with brush and all that. It's grass and everything. And they run the ferret down. The ferret runs out the hole. The goshawk catches it, and I didn't find that particularly challenging, and they hawked all day because they always went for their limit. They're real organized.
Yeah.
And they just hawked for their limit, and only certain people could come to the meet. You had to be invited to bring a bird there, and we had Czar and some of those big German falconers that did a lot of research and stuff, and it was interesting, and people certainly were nice and friendly, but I didn't like that part of the hawking. Partridge, hawking red sage grouse with some of those guys was really spectacular, really nice, put together. It's expensive. I mean, everything's owned, and Pollard had 30,000 acres he hawked on, and we had some of the other guys coming up, and then, it was, people wore ties, Wellingtons and all that, but the grouse hawking the dogs were good, but the red grouse bailed out a lot of times when I was watching anyway, and I was there 2 different trips. It was hard sometimes to keep them out of the, not just the heather, but these big piles of ferns. I forgot what they called them. And the grouse would go into that, and you're pretty well done compared to the American. But it was neat because so many of the books I'd read by Hawkins Fisher and all these guys to be out there in those same fields and stuff. And I had a good time goshawking. I caught a lot of stuff with the goshawk bojangles they gave me, and I'd catch all kinds of things. And so I had a good time watching them and being a part of it. But the Welsh Club had me speaking at their banquet and stuff, and really nice. Those guys are tough guys, so it's like going from the English, it was like going to a motorcycle gang. 2 guys down there got in a fight. I presented the recovery of the peregrine falcon and what we did to do that, and afterwards some questions came up, of course, and then this guy stands up, and they drink a lot, and he was shit-faced and sort of, and he was yelling at me, "Why didn't you have something on the kestrels? Kestrels are the neatest part." And I said, "Well, it was just on peregrines." I said, we didn't do anything on haresawks or anything. He was just giving me the president of the club tells the guy to shut up. And he says, "Any more, and I'll kick you out of here." And then 2 other guys went back and got him. And I mean, it was, I felt like I was, in one of the bars here in the old days in New Mexico.
Jeez. Wow.
Fun.
Man, that.
But those Welsh guys, and they gave me a beautiful Welsh hawking tie for a remembrance. And we hunted around, the nuclear power plant. And boy, the rabbits were thick around there. And I told myself, "Do they glow at night too? Can you hawk them?" But they use the ferrets and stuff.
Yeah.
And
That's cool.
It's just, everything's much more rigid, in comparison to how we do it.
That's a lot to process, especially you mentioned the whole ferret thing too. It's like, it's obviously illegal in the majority of parts of our country.
Yeah.
But you do see just these guys that just have these huge amounts of game that they've gotten. Is there anything special they had to do to get the ferrets going, or is it just natural for them, or did they do any extra
they didn't do
training
anything
for them?
special with the ferrets.
Yeah.
I learned that. I tried it a little bit. I didn't like it. I had a couple of ferrets here in New Mexico and stuff, and I just didn't think it was very sporting. I mean, if you want to kill things, get a gun.
Yeah.
Falconry is not, unless you lived in the Renaissance period where it was your dinner. But otherwise, it's just to see what the hawk can do and the quarry can do. And boy, I respect the quarry as much as I do the hawk. I mean, when I see a rabbit, the goshawk's up 2 or 3 times trying to catch it, and the rabbit's doing backflips and everything else to stay away, and he gets away. I think that's some of my best flights. And I say, okay, go make some babies. You're a good one. And but so often people kind of zone in on catching numbers, and I don't see the need in that. Early on, it was to catch anything. I didn't care if the bird was 5 feet off the ground, and the quarry only had 3 legs. It was, it was a catch. But then you need to evolve into the higher part of it.
Yeah. I understand. Yeah, I said things are. I mean, I've always heard that things are so different over there, and after recent conversations with, some other guys, it's I hope I get a chance to see it in person at some point, just to see, because I mean, people can describe differences to you, but you don't ever really process anything until you actually see it for yourself. So I mean, I guess it's good that you've had the opportunities to do these speaking engagements and stuff, so you had been afforded the chance to actually see these things for yourself. But I mean, was there a particular experience in any of those travels that still in your mind just kind of sticks out as like more than the rest, or was there anything that left a lasting impression on you as far as what you saw in regards to hawking or doing anything over in other places?
Yeah, Tony Crosswell, to see him fly the Tercel peregrines on partridge was really the most memorable thing about it. The red grouse was fine, and Roger's son Andy Upton, some great flights. The ones at Pollard, you can go there one season, the birds do great. You go there the next season, the same birds aren't doing as good. It depends on how long they've been hawking and stuff like that. But I think it really hammered into me to read the stuff by Fisher and these guys and Mitchell, to be there where those guys were talking about it, even going back to Shakespeare's terminology and everything with falconry. It had a lot. I think that's one of the things that concerns me about the young falconers with all the electronics. We had to go get the books and find them and read them and everything else, and everything was done by snail mail. You saved your money to make a long distance phone call to another falconer. And I'm not bragging about those times, but it did bring you in contact with the history of falconry and the depth of it. And I strongly believe, in the way that, if you don't know where you've been, you don't know where you're going. And I think in falconry, we need to have this, especially this electronic generation of falconers, need to go back and read some of those old books and stuff, even if it's on the internet, and see what it is, because falconry is still the same. You got a piece of meat and the bird comes back. I mean, it's not that complicated in a lot of ways. But we've been able to do things like with GPS and stuff. I mean, I fly birds that I would never think of flying that loose, Yeah. Like I say, these young falconers want to show us what they got. Take off the telemetry and use bells.
Yeah.
You want to be humble.
Yeah. Well, the 2 long wings that I've tried flying, I instantly, and I think it's fine as long as you have that appreciation, though. Like the first time I tried flying a long wing, a bigger long wing, which was an Ice Prairie that I had a couple years ago. From the first time I free flew that bird, the first thought I had was, I don't know how all these older dudes it or it had the guts to fly these birds without this stuff, without anything, I mean, I was just like, there's no way that I would be a nervous wreck flying a long wing without GPS.
And we just didn't know any better at the time.
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot more birds that were lost than I'm sure.
Oh yeah, I'll never forget one of the Alamosa meets. And the peregrine was still protected and stuff, and somebody would breed one there, and it'd be a blue peregrine, and hardly any of us, because we went out the beach and got fresh peregrines, and we never saw basically an adult blue peregrine. And I remember one was there in the weathering yard in Alamosa, and must have been 10 or 12 guys standing around just looking at that's really cool. Because most of us were flying prairie falcons and stuff at that time, But to see a blue peregrine was, because you lose them and you just go, hopefully get another one.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was pretty exciting, and you didn't do this kind of flying like Shingren and these guys do now, or even myself, where you just put the bird up and you look at your phone and see if it's above you, and in telemetry it was, is the sound close? Because like I showed you with my Cheyenne, he was up last year at 5,200 feet. Well, I mean, it's totally impractical.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of cool to think of that bird a mile up.
Yeah.
And have it come to you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I have to ask, just being 100% honest, which generation would you think you would have rather grown up in, though? Would you rather have had that technology to start off with? Or, it's like I said, it's great to have the appreciation and, that nostalgia, or that, seeing that progression, leading up to what we have now. But would you have rather grown up without it, or grown up with it, or, like having that GPS available to you, like from whenever you first started flying long wings? Would you have rather had that if it was available?
Well, I suppose if it was available, I'd done it, but I think the sweet spot is when, Louis Luxhanger come out with his electronic transmitters, L&L Electronics, so it was kind of the first ones before all that. Just having that simple tracking system without the GPS and knowing the speeds and all that stuff, that was the sweet spot, because we still had a lot of game, and you could fly your bird much looser than you. In the old days, if you had your peregrine up 200-300 feet over a duck pond, that was good.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that probably seemed like 1,000 feet back in
Yeah,
those
it
days.
did. Well, yeah, it was like you're catching fish, how big they were. My bird was 500 feet. Well, GPS made a lot of us realize that we weren't flying as high as we thought. And it was good to see that, but I think the sweet spot in falconry was when we just got just basic telemetry, and we could start relaxing, more. And I think nothing of my bird, one of the peregrine or the Cheyenne, just takes off and goes 3 or 4 miles out of sight, And I just, even with telemetry before we had GPS, and then just wait, and then you'd hear the beep, 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 beep. You're coming back, it's coming back. In the old days, you just sit there and pray. And the way we got the birds back, if you lost a bird without all this electronic stuff, was you went back to the field where you lost it, because usually the birds a lot of times came back to where you lost them, even if it was the next day or two later. So you go out there and park, and you'd be throwing a pigeon up and down, just,
Yeah. Well, and, being taught that kind of stuff, along with, looking for the other signs, like, a bunch of other birds going ballistic somewhere close by, crows, and a bunch of other, just a bunch of other little indicators that can tell you that, a bird of prey might be around there, so you at least know, at least have an option of the next place to look, or whatever the case might be. I completely agree that those things, even with all the modern technology, are nice to know, because you never know when those things are going to fail.
Yeah.
And, sometimes you can get lucky still and luck back into finding that bird that you lost, or whatever the case might be.
Yeah.
But,
It saves a lot of birds, I think.
Yeah, it does.
Because we lost a lot of birds back in the day. And of course, an IS bird wouldn't have much of a chance unless you really got going with it. But we flew a lot of passage peregrines and stuff in those days.
Yeah.
You know, I'd go down and trap with Colonel Meredith on South Paraday Island and caught some birds, but it was nothing to come back with 4 or 5 peregrines, and you'd have none by the next spring.
Well, I mean, that's...
And we didn't know. I started falconry in 1958. There was nobody in the state of New Mexico that flew falcons. There was one book in the university library. I was at the university at the time, and that was Emperor Frederick. That was it.
Yeah.
And until I got a hold of Webster out of an old Falconry Club of America booklet, and I don't remember who I got it from, and I went up to Webby's up there in Castle Rock, and that's when I started seeing the real falconry, or close to it. Webby wasn't that great with the high-flying birds and stuff, particularly at that time, but he did have those big white ear falcons and stuff, and he knew a hell of a lot more than I did, and Frank Beebe and stuff, but nobody in New Mexico at the time when I started. And, you know, it's just, you just learn the hard way. You learn how to make jesses, you learn how to do this and that. The hoods I got from over in England sent to me, and they weren't great hoods. I mean, I wouldn't use them on my birds now. You can see one of them in a glass container over there, but they were. That's the way you did it. You made a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
And you lost a lot of birds. And we didn't have our Maya jesses. We had regular jesses.
Yeah.
You know, and things have improved tremendously. And there was nothing for take care of frowns. So you didn't want to feed pigeons because you'd kill your bird and stuff. So it was a different ball game in those days. But you learned how to make jesses, you learned how to make leashes, you learned how to make blocks, you learned what to feed and what not to feed and all this stuff. And then we communicated a lot with letters. I gave several boxes full of letters to the archives of communications I had with German falconers and English and all around America over the years that we corresponded.
Yeah, that's it's kind of hard to imagine now what it would be like to sitting there waiting on a letter back for weeks at a time.
Yeah.
I mean, now you just send an email and, you know, you can get a response back in minutes, you know. It's man.
Well, even making a phone call, you know, it costs you $10 or $11, $12 to make a call somebody here in the United States, you know.
Right.
You had to save your money, and of course I wasn't making much money then at the time either, so it was kind of a tough deal, to say the least.
Yeah, no, I can imagine, and you know, I mean, you kind of segued into it a little bit automatically, but I mean, expound a little bit on, you know, I mean, was there any extra, I mean, aside from the obvious things, I mean, what were some of the hurdles that you kind of had to face being one of the first falconers in this state, and you know, starting, you know, being involved with starting a club or you know, having to deal with, you know, some of the things that came into existence after you got into it several years later.
Well, let me start at the. I feel like an old timer. Let me start at the beginning. Back in 1958, I was here at the University of New Mexico on athletic scholarship of wrestling and football, and I was, as a junior, I was playing across. No, I was a sophomore, junior, I guess, playing across from an All-American tackle from Air Force Academy. That's the year they went to the Cotton Bowl. His name was Brock Strom. He was a hell of a football player. I got Merlin Olsen in those days too, if you ever heard of him. He played at Utah State. Anyway, it was a tough day at the office. That's the year they went to the Cotton Bowl, so they were nationally ranked, so they were good. And we were playing our home field, and I came up the ramp kind of dragging, to say the least. And a cadet comes down the ramp carrying a falcon, a prairie falcon. And they flew him at halftime. And he walked out there, and the announcer said, "This is so-and-so. They're academy, and we're going to fly this falcon and stuff. And so he stoops the falcon to the lure out in the middle of the football field, and I was just totally mesmerized by it. It was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And so he brought the falcon down. I thought, oh shit, I better get in the locker room. So I come in there, and Coach Levy's meet me. I don't know if you recognize the name, but he was a head coach for the Buffalo Bills for years. So
Levy.
Marv was, And so Marv said, where in the hell have you been, Smylie? I said, Coach, I was just standing there thinking about how I can do better this second half. And he said, he slaps me on the back, and he says, that'll wait. That's what I like to hear. And as a result of that encounter, I just got totally fascinated. Well, so I went to the university and found this Emperor Frederick, the book. I kept checking it out. They were thinking I was stealing it after a while. And so that spring I went down to Ravel Brothers Pet Store down on 2nd Street, and they had some baby Cooper's Hawks in there. So I bought me a Cooper's Hawk. I think I paid $12, something $15 for out of a pet store. Of course, nothing's protected then.
Yeah.
And I got that there, and feeding it, what I knew, what to feed it, hamburger and stuff, best I could find out, chicken hearts, whatever I could do. And the bird baited. After a while, it got long enough tail, and it baited and dislocated both hips. It had rickets. Nobody knew any different. I thought, well, Jesus, this is kind of a bummer,
Yeah.
And so I said, well, I got to get a bird that's a little more sturdy. And so I went out and got me a golden eagle. And, of course, they weren't protected. And I went down near Duran, New Mexico, down here, and I found an eagle eyrie in an old ponderosa pine tree on the side of a cliff, kind of. And I got up there and scared the eagle. I scared her out of the nest. She was ready to branch, but not very well. And so I chased her down about a mile or so and caught her and trained her. And I was going to hunt coyotes with her and stuff. I won't go into that step, but coyotes are not that easy to find when you want one like that with a 12-pound female eagle on your fist.
Uh-huh.
But I had a lot of fun, and I was living in a canyon, a three-gun canyon off the Sandia Mountains, and I'd take the eagle and I'd put her out in the morning, and then I'd go to work and stuff and come back and call her off the cliff, and she'd come down and land on my arm, and I'd put her in the mews for the night and hacked her that way and flew her around a lot. It was a lot of fun. But I didn't do much with her, but at least she didn't die of rickets and stuff. Somebody finally shot her in the canyon.
Ah.
Yeah. But of course, you couldn't do anything. Nothing's protected in those days. So.
Right.
But that's how I got interested in falconry, and then I got a hold of Webby, and then I took up my eagle, another one, and Webby thought that was fantastic, and Morley Nelson and guys training eagles and all that. So I got involved with that and got with Webby, and Webby called me and wanted me to, he's going to form this new club, North American Falconers Association. He wanted me to come on up, and I met with him and Pete Osborno and Heidelberg and George Flame and Bill Shinners and stuff, Jim Anderson, some of them, Dennis Crisco, and they voted me Secretary of Treasurer for Secretary of Treasurer. And that's how we started the club. And then the second meeting we had was down at my place on the mountain. I was working for the Forest Service. I was a ranger for the mountain at the time. And we met there and we put the first hawk chalk together on my dining room table. So that's kind of how it started,
Cool.
And, I lasted 2 or 3 years, and then Bill Shinners and I didn't like the politics that were going on. And people were selling birds overseas. Of course, they weren't protected, and we weren't too happy with that. I won't go into names, but anyway, so I just said I really appreciate the club, but I'd rather fly birds than do all this other correspondence and stuff. And so kind of Webby and I had a falling out, and we got back together on a limited scale, and stuff. I saw him the week before he died, actually, or two. But anyway, that's how we got started.
Cool.
Then we had the first real meet in Reno at Bill Schinner's place in Reno, Nevada.
Okay. Well, and so did any of your experience with the formation of NAFA lead to helping out with, the state club here, or?
Well, I started the state club here back in 1961, I think.
Okay.
Southwest Falcon. I can show you some of our old publications and stuff that we did, and I kind of started a Southwest Falconry group because I wanted to get us together so we could learn. And we had like Granger Hunt and stuff come over from Texas and different people, and we kind of chugged along, and then it fell into disrepair, and then I think Jim Skidmore started it up again. I would like to say something about New Mexico. We're kind of overlooked as a falconry center, which is okay. But there's a tremendous amount of really nice things and nice people in New Mexico related to it. Dr. Cade used to come down here and hunt prairie chickens with us. We got Jim Weaver, who has a big ranch here, one of the starting breeders of peregrine falcons and making hybrid falcons and all that. Jim lives here. He's a godfather to my daughter, and he has this ranch here. We had Frank Bond, who was the head of the International Falconers, as well as a lawyer and stuff for NAFA for many years. Ran for governor. Friends, like, he had a lot of political influence with throughout the government and state government. He was a legislator, did lots of good stuff. We have like Brian Millsap, head of migratory birds at one time at Washington, D.C., Matt Mitchell, Madison Haley, all these guys. And some of them were real groundbreakers in what they did, like Cade and stuff. Myself getting the peregrines for the Peregrine Fund and getting the first real work being done there. Yeah. And Steve Bodio, an outstanding author and writer of Falconry. So we had a core, and the interesting thing about it is we never had a formal organization. We didn't have, this is a president, this is a vice president, and then we had different district reports and everything. We get together once a year, and sometimes we get together just out in the field if there's enough food, quarry. And I used to have a little pigeon thing where we'd come in and just fly some pigeons or something. But we didn't have any of that club stuff. We still don't to this day. Now, when we had issues with the game department and stuff on certain things, we would get together. Kent Carney lived here for a number of years, went to every commission meeting we had, and he was right in the front row making sure falconry was well represented and they didn't pull some background stuff with some preservation organization or something. And so the club really was very informal, but we didn't have any people that did illegal stuff. We didn't have any of this infighting, people turning each other in, people stealing each other's birds and all that crap that goes on. I think New Mexico has really been a special area when you take a look at all that, and we've done fine, and we don't have to have a newsletter and all that other stuff. There's probably maybe 50, give or take, active falconers in the state. But the ones we got, like Millsap, like Paul Domsky, these guys are great falconers. We had good ones like Jim Wilmarth and stuff, and when Tom Cade to come down, we'd go sage prairie chicken hunting and stuff. Of course, those birds are gone now; they're endangered. They're still here, but we can't hawk them anymore. But we had some really outstanding people like Bodio and stuff that were part of New Mexico.
Well, I mean, getting to know a lot of you guys over the last couple days, and I've driven through New Mexico a few times. I've been in and out of the state briefly. So I've been able to get snapshots, but actually, spending another couple days here, which is still technically a snapshot, it's been nice seeing just a lot of the reinforcing some of that appeal, because I really thought that it was a neat state the couple times that I've been here before, and it has become apparent with the talks that I've done with you guys over the last couple of days that there is a lot of unique stuff here, and a lot of different styles. I mean, it seems like it's possible to do so many different methods of flying here on a lot of different types of things. So, I mean, it's really hard to find places that have that much diversity. It's becoming more and more rare. The more and more development and things like that happen in different states. So, I mean, kudos to you guys. I mean, it's cool that you guys have been able to, to have that.
Yeah, and nobody, I mean, everybody pretty well gets along. You know, there's none of this stuff that was going on, but there are a lot of, like, you had Greg here with his hawking jackrabbits with long wings. You know, I hawk crows here. One bird, Charlotte, I got her from the P Fund back at Cornell, a Peel's Falcon. I hunted her for 6 years, took over, 400 or 500 crows. Hawk crows every day almost with her. Went back and she raised 27 of her own young and foster parented over 70. And just took her back and did it. And I hunted crows with sakers and stuff. But we did different things like that, and everybody was kind of doing their own thing. Mattis was down there in Roswell hunting the heck out of ducks. I mean, he took, I gave him a Tiercel peregrine Peel's bird. I think Butcher was his name. I think he was catching over 100 ducks a season. I mean, I hate to use numbers.
No, it's awesome, though.
And when I was down there, I caught 60 or 70 ducks a year. I'd just go down on weekends from work, and half of them I let loose. You know, it wasn't the killing of them. And I did make good duck fingers. I'm a good cook with those. But just the fact of watching a wild falconer that will come back to you, not a pet, and to watch it do it what it does best, and then to watch the quarry what it does.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, and it's neater being able to see that 100 times and even 60 times. You know, I mean, you can say, anybody can say what they want about, overall numbers and all that, but I would make the argument that more often than not, higher numbers in a lot of ways usually reflects someone who's flying the crap out of their bird too. And usually whenever you keep flying the crap out of your bird, you're going to have a much better bird, and a much better hunter, and you get out of what you put into it. So, I mean... Well,
that's true, but you got to have the quarry to start with too. Most people, they get, one of the faults I think falconers make is they get the bird they want, but they should consider the bird that they can hawk with.
Yeah, the bird that they need instead of want,
Yeah, but Cade said it best. He said falconry is just an advanced form of bird watching.
In a way, I guess you can look at it that way for sure.
You know, I have a lot of respect for the quarry.
Yeah.
And I don't always see that. I don't like to see these piles of jackrabbits standing in front of guys with 3 Harris hawks, I think, or 5. I just don't think that's cricket, if you will. After I catch a game, I say, "Come, wild brother, give us a gift of food and life. It's because we love you that we put you into our bodies. Isn't it great to be food for the sons of chiefs?" And that goes back, I think it was the Iroquois Indians said that on their kills a lot. And I picked that up, and I've always used that as a way of respecting my quarry to give its life so I can subsist, not just throwing it in the freezer or garbage can or whatever. And that's what's really neat.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's been another insightful conversation, and I'm glad to have finally met you in person. And
we'll come back when we're flying the Falcons.
Well, I want to. Yeah. I want to make it happen. And if travel and everything else permitting, like we discussed earlier, then I would love to make that happen for for a short trip or whatever the case might be.
Tell your wife you're going out to the sand pile.
She's so used to me being gone anymore that I could just be like, "All right, see you later," and she'd be like, "Bye," and probably be happy about it too. So, but no, it was great talking to you, and I think this is a that's a good note to end on. I think we're right at about an hour here, and so
Okay.
yeah. And is there anything else that you want to add real quick? Just in
No, I
just in closing?
appreciate you guys getting this down.
Yeah.
That's why I gave all those letters to the archives and stuff. So somewhere down in the future, because to be honest, I don't know how long we can continue with falconry, just because of the lack of quarry and
Sure.
stuff. It's, before it was getting the birds, and now it's finding a place to fly. And then if you find a place, it isn't overrun with other falconers and stuff.
Well, and it's
And
one.
hunters, and
Yeah,
and
no,
I'm concerned about this internet stuff of showing all these kills by people that are against hunting.
Yeah.
And they don't want you to kill them. Just one little story. My wife was working in the secretary's office in the Carter administration. We went to this social event. Ansel Adams was there, and a bunch of conservation people and all that. And Sherry was just met me or came over here for the first time, and I hawked ducks. And she was telling these other folks, these gals and stuff that were working in the secretary's office and in the White House, and how cool it was to see the falcon chasing these ducks and stuff. And one of the gals just said that, well, that's terrible. And Sherry said, well, no, it's just natural. It would be occurring, She said, no. And I said, well, what's wrong with that? And she said, you enjoy it. So there's a whole group of people out there that just don't understand the ways of nature. And because we enjoyed watching it, it was...
I've had that same conversation with people too, and I have to go the extra step and specify it's not the act of the killing per se that is what I enjoyed. It's the aspect of watching nature do its thing and having a front row seat that I enjoyed. Not getting off on something dying.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
and that usually once I go that extra step and explaining that, then people go, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, I see what you're saying, but
sometimes the best flights
are the ones that miss.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
No, I agree, 100%.
And
seeing that rabbit do a front flip over your bird or whatever the case might be has been some of the most fun things. Like, you're just like, that was amazing. Like, you almost want to see it again. It's just like, I completely
and there's
agree.
nothing gets you closer to nature than, I remember specifically, even in England when I went out to hawk, just the hawk and I, and sometimes the dog, walking in the evening, goshawk, and everything's, your ears are tuned up 100% better than normal. Everything the goshawk is looking and listening, and a rabbit bolts, in the evening like that. That's the most in touch with nature you can ever be, I think. And whether you catch a rabbit or not, it doesn't make any difference. Just to have that experience of just by yourself, out there with the bird, and hopefully with a nice dog, and just letting it happen,
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't do that otherwise.
No, of course not. No, and if you have somebody with you, just being able to look over and just be like, did you see that flight? That's just being able to also share that, with people. I mean, honestly, that's a great part about all this too, is getting some of those relationships also, and being able to share some of that.
Yeah,
So.
it's interesting. You can know a falconer after one or two times better than any member of your family.
Well, and also, I don't know if you found this or not too, but usually after that 6-month hunting time is up, usually you're so happy to be away from each other for an off season too. Usually,
and I'm by myself 90% of the time.
Sure,
I get together with Paul maybe every couple of weeks or something, but I just like being out there. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't. Something's going to happen no matter what. You're going to see eagles, or you're going to have wild falcons come in, and the best flights you always have are when you're by yourself. And
Usually,
forget trying to show I got a great bird to a bunch of people standing around.
Yeah, this is not going to happen.
That's why
Murphy's Law.
I don't fly birds at meets anymore for that reason. It's just too much of that pressure, even though you're relaxed with it. It's always, And then if your bird's going to screw up, that's when it's going to screw up.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. That's usually why I give the disclaimer anytime I've ever done that. It's just like, all right, this is probably going to be a train wreck, but here we go. You guys at least see a bird fly and probably go land in a tree or something, or whatever the case is going to be.
Yeah, well, mine is if you want to see God laugh, just tell him your plans.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. Yeah. That's for sure. Well, like I said, it's
been a pleasure to be on there with you, and I'm just not one of those guys that said the good old days, but there were some really good things going on at that time, and I don't lose them. That's why I say it's important for the Falconers to look back and see those values and not dismiss them, because it's easy to dismiss them now with all the electronics and you can see somebody catching their rabbit the minute they catch it.
Yeah. Well, and I've seen arguments too where it's like, well, I had this amazing transmitter on. Why didn't I get my bird back? It was the transmitter's fault, And it's just like, well, no, you still got to get the bird back even after you track it down. I mean, it's just it's all those kind of things that, it's all a matter of perspective, and I agree.
Well, it makes it fun. I mean, I've been doing it for over 62 years now, and haven't gotten bored with it. I've flown sailplanes. I did scuba dive, all these kinds of stuff, but I stayed with falconry. For one thing, the birds could fly better than I could in a plane.
Yeah.
But I think it's really, it just connects you with the outside world. And name anything else where people train wild animals to hunt for them and with them.
Yeah, I mean,
the closest thing was cheetahs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's a phenomenal thing. It's Peregrine, like Roger Troy Peterson said to me. He said, they're just like they're meant to be on your fist. I caught birds on the Tortugas. I'd pick them up, and I could set them on my fist after we put the bands on them. They'd just sit there and look at me.
Huh.
Just, hey, take me home. Of course, we couldn't do it in those days.
Yeah.
Well, we better let Mr. Dumsky come in here.
He'll be fine.
See that,
But yeah, no, it's great. Like I said, it's great meeting you in person and talking to you. And, thank you again for hosting and for your time.
It's my pleasure. Glad you could come to my man cave. It's testosterone.
Yeah, no, we got to have those.
Estrogen forbid.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you again, and we'll talk again soon.
Yep.